Let's kick off this explainer by asking literally the most urgent question facing the American West right now. What actually happens when a vital lifeline just runs out of water? I mean, the Colorado River provides water for more than 40 million people across 7 U.S. states and Mexico. But right now, reservoirs like Lake Mead and Lake Powell are sitting at historic, terrifying lows. It is a true crisis of scarcity, and the battle over who gets to use the remaining water is heating up fast.
To truly understand what's happening at West, we have to look at the different players sitting at the table. You've got farmers fighting for their livelihoods, expanding cities desperate for supply, Native American tribes claiming long-promised rights, and an international border demanding cooperation. Every single one of them is vying for a piece of the Colorado River's rapidly shrinking supply.
So, here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the shrinking river itself. Then, tribal water rights, the showdown between agriculture and urban growth, sharing with Mexico, and finally, the looming 2026 deadline.
Okay, Part 1. The shrinking Colorado River and a century-old mathematical error.
So, the whole current crisis? It's actually rooted in a colossal miscalculation from over 100 years ago, which essentially became the foundation for what's known as the Law of the River. It started with the 1922 Colorado River Compact. That agreement divided the basin into an upper and lower region, allocating 7.5 million acre-feet of water to each. Then came the 1944 Mexican Water Treaty, which guaranteed 1.5 million acre-feet to Mexico. And later on, court decisions, like the 1963 Arizona v. California ruling, cemented exactly how much specific states could take. But there was a massive, massive flaw built right into this foundation.
At the heart of this conflict is a really fascinating quirk in Western water law. Out east, they use the riparian doctrine. Basically, if you live on the shore, you share the water. Simple, right? But the arid West is governed by prior appropriation. And that means first in time, first in right. The oldest claims, the senior rights, get their water first, no matter what. If there's a shortage, the newer junior rights get cut off entirely before those senior rights lose even a single drop.
5 trillion gallons. That is the staggering volume of water, or about 16.5 million acre-feet divvied out on paper back in those early agreements. But here's the catch. That 1922 agreement was based on an unusually wet period between 1906 and 1921. Today, thanks to a 25-year drought and climate-driven aridification, average inflows are only about 12.9 million acre-feet. So we are essentially fighting over a massive phantom supply of water that simply does not exist anymore.
Moving right along to Part 2, Tribal Nations Water Rights, the First Inhabitants. Now, there are 30 federally recognized tribes in the basin, and many hold some of the most legally secure water rights in the country. This is thanks to a 1908 Supreme Court ruling known as the Winters Doctrine. Under this doctrine, when the federal government reserved land for Native Americans, it implicitly reserved enough water to make that land a permanent homeland. Because these rights often predate state allocations, they are incredibly senior. But here's the reality check. Of the 30 tribes in the basin, 12 still have unresolved or completely unquantified water claims. The Navajo Nation, for instance, has the largest unquantified claim in the entire basin.
I want you to imagine, just for a second, spending $600 a month just to have basic running water in your kitchen. While tribes fight for their legal allocations in court, this is their daily reality. As lawmakers debate the cost of massive settlements, like the $5.1 billion Northeastern Arizona Indian Water Rights Settlement Act, roughly a third of Navajo households and 30% of Hopi homes still do not have running water. Families are out there literally hauling water over 30 miles round trip just to survive.
All right, Part 3, Agriculture versus Urban Growth, Farms versus Cities.
Let's look at the numbers, because this is where that first in time, first in right rule creates an absolute clash. Nearly 80% of the Colorado River is consumed by agriculture, and a huge portion of that goes toward thirsty crops like alfalfa, which is used for livestock feed, some of which is even shipped overseas. That leaves just 21% for municipal and industrial use, which means booming urban centers like Denver, Phoenix, and Los Angeles are left scrambling for a tiny fraction of the flow.
Take Southern California's Imperial Valley, for example. These agricultural districts were established way before major cities popped up, giving them the ultimate senior rights. Imperial actually holds rights to 1 trillion gallons. Get this, one farming family there uses more water than the entire city of Las Vegas. No way, right? But as cities grow more desperate, they resort to buy and dry tactics. They buy up senior agricultural water rights and effectively dry up rural farming communities.
To stop that from happening, some folks are pushing for dry year leases, where cities pay farmers to temporarily fallow land during severe shortages. It's a modern compromise to keep farming alive long-term while keeping city taps flowing today.
Okay, part 4. Sharing water with Mexico at the southern border. Because this river doesn't just serve the U.S. A 1944 treaty guaranteed Mexico a very specific allocation. But for decades, because of all the diversions upstream, the river literally ran dry before reaching its historical end. The once lush Colorado River Delta in Mexico practically vanished, turning into a dry, barren landscape and destroying a totally vibrant ecosystem. This stark environmental reality forced both nations to sit down at the negotiating table to find a better way to manage the end of the line.
And we've seen some real progress here. Through international updates they call minutes, both countries have pledged cooperation over conflict. For instance, Minute 316 sought joint efforts to send water back into the wetlands to actually revive the delta. And more recently, Minute 330 set up a framework where Mexico agreed to share the burden of the shortages, reducing their own intake during droughts. In return, they get to store their surplus water in Lake Mead. It's an absolutely vital compromise.
Which brings us to Part 5, the 2026 deadline, the reckoning. All of these stakeholders we've just talked about, they are currently staring down a very serious cliff edge. The current operating roles for Lake Mead and Lake Powell expire in 2026. The federal government has told the 7 basin states, the tribes, and Mexico that they absolutely must reach a consensus on massive, painful water cuts. If they fail to agree by August of 2026, the feds have warned they will step in and force a solution upon them. Obviously, nobody wants that, but agreeing on who actually sacrifices their water is proving incredibly difficult.
At the end of the day, survival requires moving way beyond historical rivalries. Cities can't just buy out all the farms, the legal rights of Native American tribes can't be ignored anymore, and the U.S. can't simply cut off Mexico. The only path forward is a massive, basin-wide compromise. We're talking compensating farmers for conservation, funding tribal water infrastructure, and enforcing strict urban water efficiency across the board.
The Colorado River is a classic, stark example of a system designed for a wet century crashing headfirst into a very dry reality. So I want to leave you with this to ponder. When the legal rights written on paper vastly exceed the actual water flowing between the canyon walls, who gets left out to dry?